Hi card makers, I'm Trisha at Club Scrap based in Neenah, Wisconsin, and welcome to the Christmas in the Neighborhood Card Workshop. If there's one time of year when I really want to be efficient in my card making, it is my Christmas cards. I send about 100 every year, and I have found some great ways to save some time and to crank out a lot of beautiful cards with a minimal amount of materials. Let's first take a look at the cards that we're going to be making. It's a set of 20 cards using just 12 sheets of 12 by 12 paper. The cards we'll make fit into one of 3 different sets. The first set includes 6 double Z fold cards, and these construct very easily. They look way more complicated than they are, and they also make great use of the image sizes on the Christmas in the Neighborhood stamp sheet, which I hope you've picked up by now, and if not, it is available. And then the next set, these are all going to be vertical cards with a smaller image with this Home for the Holidays, which is very appropriate for this particular season. So each one of these cards is very similar, just a different color schematic for each one. And then the final set actually has 4 each of 2 different styles, a vertical and a horizontal, but the basic components of each of these cards and the assembly is virtually the same. And that, my friends, is how we do save a lot of time by essentially creating an assembly line for ourselves. Now this workshop comes with some printable instructions, and what's cool about this is that once you've made the cards that specify these papers, you can substitute papers with things that you have in your stash, including the embellishments as well, and maybe even the stamps, and then recycle the formulas that I've given you for creating these cards. Well, the first thing we're going to do is make sure we have the right tools on hand. For starters, it's great to have this 12-inch guillotine trimmer by Fiskars. I do carry these at Club Scrap. I'd be happy to ship one to you. We would have had them on the road with us during the Expo tour here in 2020, but that never happened. So I have a warehouse full of trimmers ready to ship out. And I'm also using one of my little inventions, the accordion pocket file, that keeps me organized while I'm making my cards. And basically, I mentioned we had 3 different sets of cards, so we're going to label those A, B, and C. As we prepare our papers, each type of paper will go into the appropriate pocket depending on which card it will be used on. That way you won't have all of these pieces all disorganized, and everything you need for set A should be in that pocket. I've got some Velcro dots I've placed along here, or hook and loop dots, and then I can take the bottom lip of that accordion pocket file and place it underneath my trimmer base, and it holds my accordion pocket file right where I can get at it. Well, without further ado, it's time to do some trimming. Before we start the trimming process, I'd like to sort the paper out into the order we'll be trimming it. So the first 2 pieces that we need to find here are ivory plain. So I'm just going to pull both of those out. 2 ivory plain. Then we're going to trim a red, a craft. So this craft is this darker color, and it's extremely heavy, sturdy paper. It's really beautiful. And then same is true for this manila. It comes from the same line of paper. And so that was the red craft and manila. Then we're going to take the craft, another one of those, and a blue. This is a little bit of a lighter weight. It's an 80-pound cover. And then a brown. Then we'll trim a red and a manila. Then a blue, and end with the brown. So the purpose of doing this is to keep things from getting confused, and that way the paper that's on the pile that needs to be trimmed should match up with what your instructions say, and then we avoid avoid making mistakes. So the first piece in the stack, of course, is the ivory, and I'm just going to go ahead and place this in the trimmer, and I am following step 1 of my instructions, and basically I would recommend that if you're new especially, ignore what you see in this image and do what it says in the text. And I know it's difficult to process it that way if you're new to this, but you'll figure it out. It's okay, 1 step at a time. So we're just doing step 1 here, and we're actually creating all of the pieces that we will be stamping on to create our cards. So let's begin by trimming at 11 3/4. Now 2 things to remember is make sure the paper is level with this top edge of the trimmer base, and that you stabilize the paper before you cut. So 11, 11 1/4, 11 1/2, 11 3/4 is going to be awfully close to 12. Check my alignment, stabilize on the clear bar, and slice. Then we'll slide this paper down to 8 1/2 inches. So, and I love that this has a 1/4 inch divider. There's a line every 1/4 inch, so 8 1/2. And then 4 1/4. 4¼ stabilize. Okay, so now you have this piece and the one right prior to that. These should be the same exact size. So I'm going to take both of those and stack them neatly together and trim on intervals of 3. So the first cut we'll make is at 9, then slide down to 6, stabilize each time, and then 3, stabilize and slice. All right, all of these pieces should be the same size, and they're going to be used in card set C. And then we have this remaining strip. It's currently 3¼ by 12. We're going to cut these on the even numbers. So that's 10, stabilize even for this, then 8, 6, and 4, and 2. Okay, so all of these pieces should be the same size, and let's put those in pocket B. And then I'm sorry to inform you that this ends up being a scrap. I usually put that in pocket D for didn't use it this time. Now I'm going to kick it up a notch. All right, we are going to trim the next ivory panel, and all of the pieces that we create here will also be stamped. And our first cut will be at 5¼ All right, stabilize, and then rotate. And now we're going to cut this into all pieces of the same size. So 10½, 9, 7½, 6, 4½, 3, and 1½. That was a lot of trimming, and if you're new to this, that may have been a little bit fast for you. I try to split the difference because some people following along are very proficient and others are brand new to it, and you'll catch up soon, I promise. If you did get lost, I'm reading from step 2, and all those measurements are listed right in the document. And I'm going to take all of these strips, all but one. I'm going to put them in pocket A. So to show you, that's going to be the piece that gets stamped on for the front of each of these cards. I'm going to take one of these, and I'm going to trim it horizontally at 5 and 2½. These two pieces go in pocket A as well. Now the fun begins. Okay, we have this remaining piece. It is 6¾ by 12, I believe. We will trim this horizontally at 10½, 9, and 4½. Okay, so the piece you just created and the one right next to your trimmer blade, those two pieces should be the same size. And we'll trim that horizontally at 6½, and 3¼ Now what's interesting about these pieces, they are all the same size, but there are two cards that have a dark base. It's a pretty dark brown. So this has been prepared so that you can have a liner for the inside of the 4 dark cards you'll be creating. So take 2 of these and place them in pocket B, and the other 2 will be used in set C. Now we have some little sniblets. These are scraps, so I'll just get rid of those. And then we have 2 additional strips. We're going to trim both of them at the same time horizontally at 5 and 2½. There should be 4 pieces that are the same size, and then you'll have 2 other little rectangles. The little rectangles are scraps, and then the remaining 4 pieces are used in set A. Good job. All right, that concludes all of the stamped panels. So now we're going to get into making our card bases, and I have a really unique time-saving tip I'd like to share with you right now. I'm going to pull out my score pal, and this is an optional step. You do not need to score, but it does make things a little bit easier. And I have information for you about scoring that I want to make sure you take with you today. So just bear with me. I'm going to take this piece of red paper, which is next on my stack, and I'm going to hold it by the edge, one of the edges, the center of the edge, and study the behavior of the paper. Then I'm going to rotate and study the behavior of the paper. Now, if I just wiggle the paper, it's very stiff going in this direction. It's very loose, flexible going in this direction. And that is the grain of the paper is running that way. And notice the direction of my score line. So my goal is to always score the paper this way so that it dips easily left to right when you place it in the score pal, so the scores are going with that grain. Now the first thing I want you to do is just score at 5.5 inches, which is a very common measurement for a scored card. And then I'm going to take this paper and flip it from the bottom to the top. That's important. Don't rotate it, just flip it bottom to top, and then score again at 8.25. That will help us later in making an accordion fold. Now leave the paper positioned just like it is, and I'm going to slide the craft over, and I'm going to check my grain direction. Make sure it wobbles from left to right, which corresponds with the direction of these lines. Score at 5.5. Flip bottom to top, and then score at 8.25. All right, one more, the manila. Hold it by an edge. Oh, that's very stiff, very flexible. Drop it in, score at 5.5. Flip bottom to top, score at 8.25. Now I'm going to leave these 3 pieces of paper kind of right back to where they were, and I'll set my score pal aside. I'll use it again later. And now I'm going to take my trimmer again and take this red piece that we scored earlier and put it into the trimmer in the same exact direction. So the score lines are running vertically. There's a larger space here and a smaller space between the lines here. The first cut will be at 11. Then I want you to rotate this paper. It can actually rotate in either direction, but I just rotated it by turning it clockwise. Whatever you want is fine. And let's cut at 10.25. I'm cutting through these score lines. 10.25. 8.5. And 4.25. What I just made are 2 card bases and then 2 of the narrow strips. Now if we look back at this card, this is one of these strips. This would be one of the card bases we'll make out of the manila in just a minute. But what I want to just enlighten you with, if maybe this is a new concept, is we're going to make a bunch of these cards. Now we've scored 3 pieces of paper. We're making a total of 6 cards. And each card has 1, 2, 3, 4 score lines. So 4 times 6 is 24 score lines would have had to have been made one at a time if we hadn't done it this way. So if you're making a whole bunch of cards and if you can figure it out, this is a great way to plan ahead by doing just this little bit of cutting ahead or scoring ahead of time. Score before you cut, and you cut your scoring in half. Okay, these 2 card bases and the strips that are scored will go in pocket A. And then you have another narrow strip. We're going to cut that horizontally at 11 and 5.5. Now, I'm going to bring this down a little bit so I can actually see my paper. So if it's way up here, I can't really tell if I'm at 11, but down here I can. I hope that makes sense. 11 and 5.5. I'll put these both in pocket B. Now, if you're not using an accordion pocket file, that's okay. Just have 3 piles. If you want to label them, you can. A, B, and C. It's the same concept. Okay, again, I'm bringing the craft paper into the mix. Here's the wide area. My score lines are running vertically. I'll cut at 11. And then I'll rotate. Cut at 10.25. 8.5. And 4.25. All of these scored pieces that we've just cut through those score lines, those go in pocket A with the others. And then same deal, we're going to cut at 11 and 5.5 on this 1-inch strip. These could have been scraps, but we rescued them from the circular file. Let's place these in pocket B, and this is just not going to be used. One more time, so I'm going to go just a little bit faster. We're cutting at 11, rotate, 10 1/4, 8 1/2, 4 1/4. Gather up all of the scored pieces. Guess where they go? Pocket A. And then one last cut at 11 and 5.5. Pocket B. Hooray! Good work. So that is step 3 actually. We did the ivory earlier. Step 3's diagram. And you'll notice on the diagram in your instructions there is an arrow that points left to right. That is important with the grain, so that we cooperate when we fold the paper in half. We're working with the grain instead of against the grain, because if you've ever folded a heavy piece of paper like this against the grain, it creates that really ugly, unattractive, crumply fold, versus something like this is going to give you a nice fold. Okay, now we're just going to do a bunch of trimming. We'll set aside our card bases for scoring and do that in batches as well. Okay, so our first cut will be at 8 1/2. And then rotate and cut at 11 and 5.5. We've got 2 card bases. I can set those aside to be scored. And then we do have this little guy. We're going to just cut a bunch of these little strips at 5.5. And that's going to go in pocket C. And this is a scrap. Scraps are pretty small. All right, now we're going to cut at, with this remaining 3.5 by 12, we'll cut at 11 3/4, 9.5, and 4 3/4. You just made 2 pieces that are exactly the same size. Place those in pocket C, and then you have the smaller rectangle B as in boy, and then you do have one little tiny scrap. Now, I'm going to take this blue piece, check my grain, going easily left to right, and I'm going to take the brown, check that the grain is going left to right when I place it in the trimmer. That means it's dipping easily, this east to west, however you want to look at it. And we're going to cut both of these at the same time. Make sure you stabilize on the clear bar. It's really important for this when you do a double sheet like this. So 8 1/2, rotate and cut at 11, and 5.5. I'm going to set aside the blue and the brown card bases to be scored. Then we have these 2 little strips. We're going to cut horizontally at the measurement we always will, 5.5, and file both of these in pocket C. And then we have a scrap. Then you have the 3.5 by 12-inch strip remaining. We're going to cut at 11 3/4. That has a purpose. Then 9.5 and 4 3/4. And here you have 4 panels for pocket C. And then you have some smaller rectangles for pocket B and 2 little tiny 1/4-inch scraps. Now what you just did is the formula we're going to use again and again. However, in your instructions, it looks like you have all these new trimming diagrams. Basically, the trimming itself is exactly the same. It's the filing that's a little bit different. So we're moving on to the red. I'm going to check my grain direction, make sure it dips left to right, and the manila also dipping left to right. This is really heavy paper, but I'm pairing it with a lighter weight paper, so I should be able to trim both of these at the same time. We're going to follow the same process. So 8 1/2, rotate and cut at 11, and 5 1/2. I'm going to set aside the manila and the red card bases to be scored. And then we have the narrow strip again. Guess what we cut that at? 5.5. This time the strip goes in B, and you did create a small scrap again. You're going to get used to this. 11 3/4, 9.5, 4 3/4. All of these larger panels go in pocket B, and then the smaller rectangles also go in B, and then you have 2 little scraps. All right, next, just 2 more pieces left to go, and we have the foundation for all 20 of our holiday cards completely ready to go, minus just the scoring, which is going to be super easy. So again, 8.5. This is just the blue, and then go 11 and 5.5. These 2 pieces are scored. And I'm just setting those aside just to do them later. Then we have this narrow strip. Once again, we'll cut it at 5.5 and file that in pocket C. And we have this larger strip, 11 3/4, 9.5, and 4 3/4. 2 pieces the same size in the blue go in pocket C. Then you have the smaller rectangle, B, and 2 little scraps. Then I'll turn to page 3 of the instructions. This piece is going to be brown. I'll check my grain direction, going left to right. And once again, 8.5. Rotate 11 and 5.5. So that's 2 more card bases. Our little strip, once again, 5.5. This goes in pocket C. A scrap, and finally 11 3/4 on this last strip, 9.5 again, and 4 3/4 again. All right, all of these pieces, the 2 larger rectangles and the small panel, all of that goes in B, and 1 more little scrap. Wait, I have a very small scrap pile. I've gathered it up. And this is pretty much it. There is that small 1/4 inch by 12 inch strip in our D file. But yeah, this is not bad. For when you make 20 Christmas cards out of 12 sheets of paper, this is the only thing not used. That is pretty impressive. I feel very comfortable putting this in my circular file, which I'm going to do right now. Do you know what a circular file is? I think most. Next, I'm going to swap my trimmer for a score pal. If you remember, the trimmer is what's holding all of these papers vertically, so I'm just going to take the whole batch and set them aside. And I'm kind of working my way backwards, using the instructions just as a reference for where these card bases get filed. And I just want to share a few important time-saving scoring tips for you. The first tip is that you can score 2 pieces at the same time. So I'm going to place them both in my score pal and using a good quality bone folder to score them at 4 1/4. And that just basically puts them in half. And another tip about the scoreboard is you can use it as a jig, in a way, to help you align the corners more neatly. So you can bring that paper up into the corner. That way you know everything's tight and aligned, and then just finger crease. And if you want later, you can stack up multiple cards at a time and crease with a bone folder. So again, I'm just using it as a jig, and then making my crease, and that way I know my corners at the bottom are nice and aligned. And you know, as my vision changes, as I mature, I notice that it's sometimes hard to get those things aligned. This really helps you see a lot better, because building your card, you know, folding in half is the foundation. You want those corners to be as straight as possible. Now these 2 brown pieces are used in card set C, so I'm just gonna go ahead and file those away. And I'm taking the next 2 blue pieces, and I'll score them at the same time at 4 1/4. And those will be used also in card set C. And then I have this manila is next, the manila and the red. Those are also card set C, both of these. Now, another thing that you can do, if let's just say you don't have a scoreboard, we did trim these papers so that the easiest direction to fold this would go this way. So if you don't have one, just simply align the corners as best as you can and crease. And you're still going to get a beautiful fold because you trim the paper in cooperation with the grain direction. Or if you just want to skip the scoring altogether and still use your score pal to align your corners, you don't even really need to have the score line because the paper will want to be folded in that direction. I hope that makes sense. So the red and the manila. The manila is a real heavyweight paper. You may want to score it, but again, because we trimmed and planned ahead. Now, let's just say you made an error in your decision about which way, or maybe you forgot to trim the paper with the grain direction as indicated. Then that's where that score pal really is going to be an important tool. And then often what I do is I get finger crease a lot of cards and then stack them up neatly and then burnish one side and burnish the other. It's a great way to make some nice crisp folds. This is card set C for all of that. So I think that's all of the bases for that set. And now I have 6 remaining, brown, aqua, and craft. So all you need to do is just fold those in half. Now that I have these 6 pieces folded in half, I'll do my little quantity burnishing trick. Just stack, burnish, flip, and burnish. And these are the card bases that remain for card set B. So I'll go ahead and file those. Now the cool part about this is all the prep work is done. So at this point, if you want to hang out in the living room with your significant other and watch some TV while you finish the cards, that's always a cool thing to do. The trimming is the concentration. I always say cut before cocktails. I'll help you make a sample of a card from each set so you know how everything comes together and how easy this method can be. And so I'll just remove everything from pocket A and sort of organize it by size. The next step is to do what I call the deal. And for that, I consult my instructions. This is page 3 of the instructions. Here's a cross section of what the card construction will look like, and then a set of 6 cards. So I'm going to try to mimic what I see happening in these images for when I deal out all the paper that I have in my hand. So I'm going to begin by dealing 2 of the manila card bases. Make sure I have enough room here. You can never have enough crafting space. Then 2 red card bases and 2 craft. So those are my 6 card bases for the project. And then the narrow strips, I'm going to begin with red, then go to craft, and then manila. Followed by 1 long ivory strip for each card. And you'll be happy to know there is a spare part. So if maybe your stamping doesn't go well in some cases, each piece will give you 2 opportunities to get a nice clear image, plus you have 2 more opportunities to get it right here. And then we have the small piece for each of these cards. So all of the pieces out of pocket A have been distributed, and every single card in this set is assembled in the exact same way. So what I'm going to do now is just stack up 5 of the cards, and then we'll make 1 card together. And I'm just going to give you a few stamping tips here. One of the things I really like to have handy when I'm stamping is a grid paper pad. I actually use the grid to help keep everything aligned, and the pad also serves as some cushion from underneath the stamp, so I get the best results. And I'm going to, after looking at this, I know that there are several images that we are using in this set. The first one from the stamp sheet is this cute little village. And that is designed to fit onto this rectangular piece of paper. So initially when I mount my stamp onto an acrylic block, I like to use the blocks that have the vertical and horizontal grid. So I'm going to show you quickly how I do this. I take this stamp itself and I put it with the image side down on my grid, and I make sure it's nice and level with the grid itself. Because the stamp is clear, I mean, it's well used, as you can see, but I can make sure it's aligned. And then I come in with my block, which is also on a grid, and I align the grid of my block with the grid of my paper. And when I push down, now the image is beautifully mounted onto the block. If that's new to you, I hope that helps. Now with this image, I had a little trouble getting a really nice, solid, consistent image, so I have one additional tip for you. First of all, I'm using Club Scrap's India ink. It's a nice, clean, solid black. This is my go-to for almost all my stamping, and it's a nice waterproof and fast drying So I'm bringing the ink pad to the stamp and then thoroughly inking it. And this is particularly true on the first time you stamp an image. Typically I would test it, of course, on the grid as well, just to make sure everything's level, but you know, time's a waste in here. So I'm going to place this image down, and as long as my paper is aligned on the grid and my acrylic block is aligned on that grid, I should have a nice straight impression. So I'm going to push it down and press firmly. Now what I've learned from stamping this is sometimes there might be a little spot that has a trouble making a connection. So if that ever happens to you, it might just be me, I don't know. At this point, because of the material of the photopolymer, we can actually flip the whole thing over and just make really good contact. So this is just if you're having a trouble with an image or getting a good contact at all points, now that the image is stuck to the paper, you can press without damaging the image. And then lift it, and I have a really nice impression of that image. Now we have another text to stamp on the other white panel, so I'm going to do the same thing. Line it up on the grid here, and then line the grid with the grid of my stamp block, and I should be nice and level. And then here's the other smaller white panel. So make sure that's nice and level. And I'm going to stamp in the upper left corner to allow just a place for a simple signature. You know, when I'm doing Christmas cards, I don't want to write a novel in all of them. I just want to sign them and go. So this gets me ready for that. Now at this point, it's entirely up to you if you want to do any coloring or enhancement. I can just like maybe take a little colored pencil, and if I want, I can maybe add a little touch of color here and there. And I really didn't want to do a whole lot of coloring. So I kept it to a minimum and just like did a couple of the trees, added some ornaments, and kind of left it at that. You can go all out and maybe work on this at night. You know, instead of your adult coloring books, you can maybe give this a whirl. It's totally up to you. Or you could just leave it all in black and white, which I've done a bunch of those as well. I'm sure you could think of all kinds of fun things to do with the coloring on this, but that's where we're going to leave it. And if you have glitter, if you have like snow, fake snow, whatever, just think about fun ways you can utilize that. And now I just have a little bit more stamping to do, but first I'd like you to fold your card into an accordion style fold. What's important here is that we did score it, and a score has a divot and a bump. Make sure the bump of the score goes on the inside of the first fold, which will fold the card in half. And if you want, you can burnish that with your bone folder. And then here's another bump. So we're going to fold again, just that one flap. And that was the reason why we flipped when we scored. We first scored at 5.5, flipped, and that's what creates the bump going in the right direction to make a correct fold on the score. It's just going a little extra, okay? Here's another bump. I'm going to bury it inside my fold, and that's a good way to remember it. Bury the bump. And then here's another bump. I'm going to bury that inside my fold once again. Okay, very good. Now, a couple little finishing touches before we assemble. Your kit came with some ribbon, so I'm going to take a scissors dedicated to fabric and just make a angled cut like that. So it's not like a parallelogram, maybe would be the word. And I'm going to take just some regular tape. I'm going to fold this piece in half, so just a little bit of an angle. And I'm going to situate my strip so that this wide area is on the front, and then the folded area goes up to the right from there. And I'm going to just place this right on kind of toward the left edge of the top here, just like that. Then I will add some adhesive to this decorated and stamped panel and layer it onto the card. So if I was going to use glitter, I would absolutely use it after this has been placed. Then over here on this side, I'm going to add the interior greeting for this card, and that should fit right into that scored area. Now before I attach this, I'm going to be adding just a few more stamped images, and in fact this is one of my favorites. Okay, this little snowman guy. This is completely optional, so I'll put him on a mounting block and ink my favorite little snowman. And I'm going to put him in the upper right corner, kind of at an angle, just saying, hey there. Okay, and then I'll get rid of that. And I'm going to grab Home for the Holidays. This is just a little sentiment on the sheet. And remember my trick. So I'm going to place this level on my grid. We have these desk blotters available. So if you don't have something like this, please just pick one up and it will last a long, long time. So as long as I align the grids, I'm good to go. I'll ink it. Always bringing in the pad to the stamp. I never bring the stamp to the pad. And align my grid with my paper. I have a nice Home for the Holidays. So the final assembly is so easy. Make sure you close the base of the card so that the flap is on the left, and then close the accordion strip so that the wide part's in front and the little flap is on the right. Flip it over, and we're going to apply adhesive to the areas that are exposed only. Do not put any adhesive like in this spot, okay? So now it's closed, adhesive here and here. Flip it back over, and I'm going to attach it just above the Home for the Holidays. And again, it will overlap the snowman. That's okay. And now I've completed the Z-fold card. Yay! Isn't that fun? It's just so cute. I absolutely love this. And you will go ahead, once you take all of the materials out of set A, you will make a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the other set. 6 of these cards you will make. And there's another option for the inside I wanted to show you. There is the holiday card. Here's your obligatory holiday card on the inside. Or there's another really perfect sentiment, Together in Spirit, with a little heart. And I put both of those onto the block together and stamped them at the same time. So you can go 50-50. You can only use this one. Maybe you only want to use the other one. It's up to you how you want to stamp these. I mean, the world is your oyster here. It's Christmas, and you get to pick whatever you want for your Christmas card. So these are the first 6 cards in set A. Next, I'm going to clean up my area a little bit and empty the contents of pocket B. Once everything's out of the pocket, you'll want to still go ahead and sort the pieces out by size. There are going to be some long, narrow strips, and then all the card bases and various sized panels. So just make sure everything kind of makes sense. And then turn to page 4 of your instructions, where you're going to see what you need to deal out in order to make the cards. Now, this is just a suggested arrangement of assembly, and you may veer from that all you want. They're your own cards. But the base for my card, set B, 1 and 2, is going to be the brown. And then I'm going to go to this beautiful non-traditional holiday shade of like a aqua blue, and then craft. I kind of like to veer a little bit from the traditional pine green, but you could always substitute that. And now we have these other panels. So we're going to start out with a manila on each of the brown, and then a brown panel on each of the blue cards, and a red panel on each of the craft colored cards. Now remember these 2 ivory panels that we have, those are going to go on the inside of the brown card because it's a dark color, and that way you have a liner you can write on. So I try to think of those things. I try. Then each one is going to get like a strip here. So we've got 2 red, and then a manila, and a manila, and a manila, and another red. And we have 2 spare craft. I'm going to put those were just part of a sheet. So I'm going to move these to the C pocket and use those for later. And finally, a blue, a red, a craft, a brown, and a brown. And we have a leftover manila, and that's okay. I'm going to set that aside. Now I'll stack up, as always, the 5 previous samples, and we'll make this one together because, again, all of the cards in this set go together in the same exact way. So you can assemble them assembly line fashion, like you do the same step 6 times, or you assemble one and then you assemble the next one. Of course, if I'm doing it, I'm going to be assembling doing all the same tasks. I'm sorry, I forgot, this would have been in that folder. The small ivory panel belongs with each card as well. And that's going to be what we stamp on. You're probably like, Trisha, I have all of these little ivory panels. What was I supposed to do with those? Okay, and then let's see. Let's do our stamping first. I'll get this guy, and here again, the method I used was I took this house image, which I think is absolutely adorable, and I put it nice and straight on my work surface, facing down. Okay, so the raised part of the image is facing down, and then Home for the Holidays goes right below it and centered, making sure it's level. I'm going to make sure Home for the Holidays is nice and level. I'm looking at the text and then the grid. I'm going to scoot this as close as I can get to it. And then I'll take my mounting block. The etched side is closest to the stamp. Okay, so I'm ready to stamp. I'll take my trusty India ink, which again is my favorite go-to because of how fast it dries and that it's permanent. It's not a solvent, it's a dye-based ink. Then I'll just center this over the image and stamp. Perfect. Next, I'll grab a red colored pencil, and I'm just going to do two things. I'll color my heart with a nice firm hand and the bow. Can you color the whole house? Can you do all kinds of fun things? Can you emboss it? Of course, whatever you want. But I like to keep it simple because I'm going to make 100 of these and I don't have all day. So the next thing I'm going to do is just add some ribbon. So I'm going to trim a length of ribbon to be a little bit longer than the red paper strip. And I know this is red on red. You could skip this ribbon if you wanted to and use it in a different way. That's fine. But I just wanted to show you a couple things. Ribbon has a grain. The way it's coming off the big spool that it's on, it was wound a certain way and it likes to be wound in that direction. So why fight it, right? Even your ribbon can be checked for a grain direction. I'm going to put it like a little bit closer to one edge than the other and wrap it around and secure the ends on the back of the strip with some tape. This gives me a nice one-dimensional but textured embellishment. So now I have these elements and I'm going to turn them all over. This is how I would do it, and add adhesive to all of them in one batch. So I might do this with all of my cards. It's just like line them up and add the adhesive to everything. That saves a lot of time. Okay. The first piece to go on is going to be this largest panel, and I'm going to use a ruler, and I know that if I attach this 3/8 of an inch from each edge, it's going to be nice and straight and centered. So I'm going to place my acrylic grid ruler 3/8 of an inch from the edge, and I'm going to rest this against it 3/8 of an inch from the bottom and from the top, and now my panel is on there nice and straight. That's how I use my grid ruler. Next, I'm going to attach this 1/2 inch from the edge of the manila panel with the ribbon side closest to the left. So my ribbon's here, and now I know this strip is on my card nice and level. I hate having it crooked. It drives me nuts. Then I'm going to attach this piece 1/4 inch from the top and side of this panel. And I just got finished making a bunch of these for my samples, so I remember all these measurements, and this is a really good time to be filming. So now this is also equally spaced here on the upper half of the card. And finally, I'm just going to eyeball this because it's a narrow enough margin I can probably get it nice and straight. That fits right in there. The last thing I did, and this is optional, there probably won't be enough ribbon for 4 of these style of bow, but I want to show you how to make this gorgeous bow. It's very simple. It's a basic bow. Take the ribbon and make a loop and a second loop, kind of like maybe when you were little and you were taught to tie your shoes by making 2 bunny ears. There they are, 2 bunny ears. Crisscross the bunny ear. Bring the front ribbon around the back and through the loop and pull. And it's going to be really unattractive initially, but once you start pulling the tails and straightening your bow, it's going to look really nice. And what I appreciate about this style of bow is that the knot is extremely flat. And it's so handy for when you want to mail something out. You can be confident it's not going to get snagged up in the postal machine. It's just a nice, flat, really good looking bow, especially made out of a thin ribbon like this. And if you happen to have some glue lines or something like that, I do like to use liquid glue sometimes for projects like this, but if you just take a glue line, if you have one, and lay it on your work surface, and then bring the bow to the line, push, that pretty much attaches the glue line to the bow, and then you can layer it onto your card. And that is as sweet as can possibly be. I love this. And don't forget, you have the liner for the inside. If you want to eyeball or use the ruler for centering, that's entirely up to you. And now you have a place to stamp a sentiment of your choice from the stamp sheet for the inside of the card. I'll probably use the one that says, "Wishing you a Christmas where love is shared and memories are made." I love it. That would be perfect for that. But this is every single card in the set. Using all of this will be constructed in the exact same way, with only one exception. However you decide to make the bow, there probably won't be enough red ribbon for 6 bows in that style, plus to be able to wrap around. So maybe you skipped the ribbon on the red strips. I don't know. You can decide. These are your own cards. So here is the other example. So this one does not have the bow. This one has the bow I showed you. This one does as well. No bow on this one. I had a little tiny piece of ribbon left, so all I did was just tied a knot into it and secured it to the card. Isn't that sweet? Oh, I forgot to color. Now would be a perfect time to add a little color to my heart here. Yay. Okay, there's your half a dozen card set B. Let's move on to C and empty that pocket. So I think by now you sort of know the drill. Empty the pocket and sort all the pieces into piles by size, working from largest to smallest. And then of course we'll take our instructions and turn to page 5. Now there are a total of 8 cards shown in this set. It's because they're all assembled the same way with very little variation. The only change I made was made 4 of them vertical, 4 of them horizontal, and then the ribbon embellishment is just slightly different. So let's just deal out the entire 8 cards by looking at the picture and then what we have in our hand, and I'll still show you how to make one of these because they are so similar. So brown, a blue, and a blue, and a manila. Those are the 4 vertical cards. I'm going to make sure you can see this. And then I'm going to do a horizontal red and a brown and a manila. That's heavyweight paper. I love it. And red. So those are the basis of these cards. Next, each one will need a panel that has a color. So blue, craft, blue, and then brown, blue, blue on the manila, and brown on the red. Each one will, well, not each one, well, let's see how this computes here. I wasn't really sure how these little strips were going to work out. Let's do a craft and a brown, and then I'm going to skip these 2, and I'll do a blue, craft, brown, and blue. And I had one left that I had just thrown in there from before, so maybe I'll just add it to that one. That's designer's choice. Okay, now when I look at the remaining ivory panels, there are 2 larger ones. Those are the panels that are going to go inside the cards that have the brown base. So that's this one and this one. And then also every single card should have 1 panel for stamping. So I'm going to stack everything but the first horizontal card. Let's see, it's going to be this one. I'll keep that and set all of these other ones aside and show you how to make this horizontal card here. We're going to begin by stamping the panel, and I already have my scene built with my clear stamps. Did it the same way. I started face down on my grid paper. Then I'll very carefully ink this image. Again, bringing the pad to the stamp. Gives me a lot more control and it's less messy. I did get a little bit of overstamping here, but that's okay. I'll clean that off. But it happens less if you bring it to the pad. And then I'll align this with my grid, align my grid with my grid, and I'm going to stamp this more to the right side of the panel, so I have room for ribbon on the left. Just press firmly. And now the image is kind of stuck to the paper, so I'm going to flip it over and just make sure I made good contact, especially on the detail of the house. And I'll peel that away. Lovely. Okay, if you want, you can. Once again, in my case, I just added some. Before you do this, you may want to just give that ink a second or two to dry. Like I said, it dries quickly. It's all it needs, right? Okay, the first thing I'm going to do here is nest this ivory panel onto the brown, and it's a quarter of an inch reveal. So that's kind of how I'm going to make sure this is lined up nice and level. Beautiful. Then I'm going to take this gorgeous satin ribbon, and at Club Scrap we always do two-sided or double-faced satin, so that when you're tying a bow or anything like that, you don't have to worry about having like a nasty side of the ribbon showing. And all I did was just put a knot into the ribbon, and I'll trim that tail and take some tape. I'll wrap that ribbon around the card, bring it to the back, secure those ends with the tape. Okay, we're almost there, my friends. Strip goes on next. I'm going to use my ruler again. So every cube on the ruler represents 1/8 of an inch, and that big bold solid line right through the middle of the ruler, that represents 1 inch. So I'm going to rest that 1 inch line of the ruler against the bottom edge of the card, so that when I attach my narrow strip, I call those like anchoring strips, just to give the little foundation to the card. It'll be nice and level. Then I'll come in with this panel. The ribbon will interfere with my ability to measure from the long edge, which is my preference, so I'll do it from the short edge, and I'm just grabbing any old cube, three cubes in from the side and from the bottom and top, and now it's beautifully aligned on my card base. Isn't that an adorable card? Let's take a look at the rest in the set. We have 8 of them, so 4 vertical, 4 horizontal. For the vertical card, I did the snowman. I just simply colored his gloves with the same colored red pencil, red, and then stamped 1 day of coal, 364 days of fun. I'll take my chances on the front. Remember to add the liner to the inside of the brown cards. Now, hindsight being 2020, I decided to go ahead and add this really sweet bow to the top. So when you do yours, make sure you just stamp a little bit lower on the panel so you have room for the bow. I centered it top to bottom, and it needs to be just down a little bit. I had enough of this beautiful brown suede texture ribbon to make 3 of these classic bows, and then I used some of the red to make a 4th one. And then here, of course, are the remaining 4 horizontal cards with just the knotted satin ribbon on the left. Aren't they beautiful? I just love these cards, how easy they are. 20 cards out of 12 sheets of paper with a fully recyclable formula. And if you are new to Club Scrap and you like this approach, I do this every single month with our page kits and card kits. So everything we send is used. You can see there's very little waste when we're done. Just that little tiny pile of scraps I showed you that already are disposed of. So no guilt about how you use or fail to use your paper. It's all laid out and mapped out for you with a beautiful recipe. And then the beauty of this too is that you can use this again and again, whether you're making holiday cards or not. Take paper from your stash, substitute it with what I've listed here, and you can construct 20 more cards out of 12 more sheets of paper. I hope this has been fun. I hope you've learned a lot along the way, and thank you for hanging in there and for your patience. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to us at info@clubscrap.com or give us a call. We'd love to speak with you. All of our contact information is at the bottom of every page of our instructions. We're here to help. Hope to see you soon. Thanks for joining me.